I'd like to welcome all persons of goodwill here this evening. We have Brother Malaspina that's going to speak to us with some interesting experiences. Brother Malaspina, a few years ago, he was sent to the foreign assignment at Italy, and he also witnessed in Sicily and in Malta and North Africa with some very interesting experiences. Now we'll listen to him, and the theme of his talk is Blessings After Gilead. Mr. Malaspina.
Most of you here this evening have at least heard of the School of Gilead, and those of you who have heard of Gilead have certainly prayed for Jehovah's blessings to be upon it. I'm very happy to be able to give you some first-hand reports that your prayers have been answered, in that the countries where I have had the privilege of visiting and carrying on some of the Lord's work, certainly the missionaries who have graduated from the School of Gilead and are now in those foreign assignments are a very, very happy group of people, and they're doing a very fine work. There was a trust from Jehovah God given to a faithful brother of old, Abraham. And Abraham left everything behind, and of course he went into that savage country. And was he happy? He certainly was. He made new friends, and the Bible says that Jehovah God counted him as his friend. He had a lot of responsibilities, but Jehovah knew he could make progress, and he expected it of him. In fact, he had a lot of ties back in the home country. He had some 300 servants. And of course he had many, many heads of cattle, which meant he was very prosperous. But he knew the most important thing was to go where the Lord knew he could go. And that's what he did, and he was happy. There's another man in the Scriptures that most of you know about, if not all of you. He wasn't a very nice-looking man as far as physical appearances go. He was a short man, about 4 feet 11, according to historians who lived contemporaneous with him. He was bald-headed, and he had a very high forehead. It was all deeply creased. Had a big nose. He was bandy-legged. His high cheekbones were very obvious. He was humpbacked. And his eyes were continually running with some matter. He had sick eyes. You know who I'm talking about. It was the faithful Apostle Paul. And here in the 16th chapter of Acts, Jehovah knew that he could make progress. And so this call went out to him. Here in the 9th verse, and during the night a vision appeared to Paul. A certain Macedonian man was standing and beseeching him and saying, "Step over into Macedonia and help us." There it was. Did Paul go? Look what happened when he did go where the Lord had sent him. Sometimes we are not always appreciated in our assignments, but that doesn't detour the fact that we should go. And here in the 22nd verse, it brings out these interesting facts as to how he was appreciated in that assignment. And the crowd rose up together against them, and the civil magistrates, after tearing the clothes off of them, gave the command to beat them with rods. After they had inflicted many stripes upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them securely. So sometimes, even though we do make progress, it isn't always appreciated by those who do not love what is right and do not love the Creator and His righteous requirements. But it doesn't mean that we won't be happy, because in the following verses it says that after they left that prison house, they went away singing. Well, people usually sing when they're happy, and that's what the case was with the Apostle Paul and those that were with him. And today the missionaries in different parts of the world are in that same category. They're very, very happy. They're just as happy as all of you congregation publishers sitting here this evening who are doing your utmost in your territory. About 4 years ago, I was with my wife at the Watchtower School of Gilead. We graduated from Gilead, and the president of the society gave us an assignment in the country of Italy. We are very happy to receive that assignment because in that country there are some 55 million people. And of course they have known nothing but oppression for many, many centuries. And the people today in this generation are suffering from the darkness of the ages before them. And they too are living under an oppressive rule, denied the many privileges that we have here in this country. Well, the first place we were assigned to was a city called Bologna. You have read about Bologna. It's spelled like Bologna. You know, that's where the famous bologna gets its name. And we were sent to that city, and it happened to be that it's the headquarters city of the communist organization in Italy. And the missionary home where we were assigned was in the same block of houses as the headquarters office of the communist organization. And incidentally, there are now something like 15 million voting communists in that country. Most of them who do not believe in any God whatsoever except in the red God, because they are of the red religion now. The missionaries in that country are not allowed to stay in Italy as missionaries. So every 3 months they have to leave Italy, the city where they are working, and they go up into Switzerland or into France or Austria or one nearby country, and they stay overnight, and they come back down into the city where they're assigned and go into the police station. And when they are asked the reason for their stay in that city, the reason, of course, is tourist. Well, they are not lying to the officials. They are tourists. They have another work that they're doing there, but that's none of their business. That's the Lord's business, and of course, they don't tell them everything they do. And so every 3 months there's a reoccurrence of going out of the country. Well, you can imagine if you're in a country of about 40,000 and you've been there about 9 months, what the police officer will say when you come back there to renew your visa papers. He'll usually say, now listen, this is you've been here 9 months now, and after all, it's a small town. There's only a couple bridges in the place that are of any importance, 2 or 3 statues. How long are you going to stay here as a tourist? Well, this time we're learning the language now. We've made friends. We're learning the Italian language. And, of course, now we'd like to stay to learn the language before we leave. By that time, interest is being accumulated in that area, and the clergymen in that area begin to find out that there are Protestants there, as they call us, and then pressure is put on the police. This time when we come back into the city, what is your reason for staying here? We're tourists. Well, when you leave this time, don't come back. There is no arguing with the police. Remember, there are 55 million people there. There's no use arguing about 20,000 because already there are some to take over the interest in that town. So everything is packed this time, plus the trunks. Away you go, up into Switzerland, stay overnight, come on back into the country, only you go to a different city and you start all over again. And that's how your dear brothers and mine are staying in that country, and the work is being carried on. You might be thinking, how and after how long do you begin to carry on the witness work in a foreign assignment? Well, you begin talking as soon as you're there. Sometimes you're not even unpacked. A day or two after you arrive in your foreign assignment, you go out into the witness work, door to door. You memorize some words. Perhaps it might sound to you like it sounded to me when I first heard it. They would say, Io sono un rappresentante della società Torre di Guardia. What's it sound like? Well, that's the way it sounded to us. You memorize some words, some sounds, and you present these sounds to the person at the door. He doesn't know what you're talking about because when they're sounds, they're usually just sounds to us too. And so the person, if he demonstrates that he wants the book or the booklet, whatever the case may be, he'll take it. If he just stands there, you repeat the phrase again and again and again, until finally he either gets angry or he says something in Italian and he takes the book away from you, and you hold your hand out for money, and he gives you the money, and away you go. The next time you come back, you bring some brother with you who can speak Italian. Interest is manifested, and as this man is speaking, you're picking up new sounds. And one day, after you're there a few months, those sounds become part of your recognizable and usable vocabulary. And you wake up one morning and you're speaking in another tongue, being able to praise the great sovereign of the universe, Jehovah, in a foreign assignment, and you're very, very happy indeed. Today in that city of Bologna, there are something like 35 publishers. Now, most of those publishers used to be communists, and of course everyone at one time was a Roman Catholic. That country, as you know, has always been a Catholic country, but they are losing very rapidly many people, and of course the only thing that could stem that loss would be to fill those people's minds with Bible truth, and then they wouldn't fall away to something godless. And so the work of the missionaries there is to help the people to see real freedom. It wasn't after but a short time later that we received an assignment from the society to go on down to Naples. In Naples we used to meet in a place, well, it wasn't a beautiful kingdom hall like this, and incidentally it's good to mention that it's really a great privilege to see how you brothers here in this country are wholehearted for Jehovah God in His wonderful organization. You have put forth many efforts in places like these, many of the kingdom halls that I have visited since I've been home, and it shows that you are very happy to give your all and welcome people of goodwill into places that represent well the theocracy. And of course that's commendable, and it's a privilege to write back to the brothers in those countries who are corresponding with us and to tell them how you are wholehearted for Jehovah God's organization and of course the vindication of His precious and holy name. Well, we used to meet in this place. It was in the bottom apartment, or bottom room I should say, of an old apartment house. And so we asked the Zia, or the aunt, this old sister, if we could use this place for a kingdom hall. And she says, well, when I was dedicated, I didn't leave my material possessions outside the immersion pool, but everything was dedicated to Jehovah God. So if you see fit to use this little old place, why, go ahead and use it. Well, we were very happy for that expression of love. And so she had her wardrobe in that room, she had her table and chairs and everything you could think of in there to make up a home, all in this one room, which was about twice the size of this platform that I'm standing on. And here she had all these things there, all cluttered up. Well, every Thursday and every Sunday, the brothers would meet there a little bit early, and they'd take all of the Zia's things out of that room, and they'd set up a kingdom hall. That would be chairs with a plank across on the chairs, and they would make up benches. Then, of course, a little rostrum, something on the order of this that I'm talking from tonight, and that would be the kingdom hall. And after the meeting was over, everything was carted back in, set up, and it was the Zia's house again. And that went on and on for a long time. Well, it came time to begin the Theocratic Ministry School in that city. You know, they are behind us in many things. They do not have the Theocratic Ministry School like we have it here in many places, but now it is quickly covering the whole country. Well, the time to start the school in Naples had arrived, and the brothers were given their assignments, and I shall never forget the first night, and I don't think you will after I tell you about it, that the Theocratic Ministry School was started. There were two brothers in particular that I'm thinking of who gave their talks that night. One, his name was Carmen, and another's name was Peter. And so the Theocratic Ministry School followed the service meeting. The service meeting preceded it. Well, it came time for the meeting, and the prayer was said, and all of a sudden here came Peter up to the platform to give his talk, or up in front of the class. There he was. He started off and he gave one of the finest talks you can imagine, considering that most of those brothers have never been to any kind of a school any time in their lives. And here they were starting school at 35, 40, and 60, and even 80 years old. Well, Peter gave a good talk. The only thing wrong with it was that he gave it on the service meeting instead of the theocratic ministry school. Now, have you ever had someone, perhaps Brother Halvagen has had someone call him up, some of you brothers, maybe about 20 minutes before the service meeting starts or the theocratic ministry school, and they'll say, "Dear Brother Shield, would you please get someone else? I'm a little bit tired tonight. I can't hardly make it." And Shield will probably answer, "Well, you know, it's kind of late now to be getting someone." "Well, you'll have to anyway. I just can't make it tonight, and thanks a million anyway," and down goes the telephone. Well, wouldn't it have been better for that brother to make the mistake that Peter made instead of making the big mistake of not giving his talk at all? And that's why sometimes we learn even from babes in the truth. I don't say that Shield has told me these things, but just in case there is anyone like that, well, that's a good thing to remember. Carmen got up to give his talk. He was a little brother about that high, and he was dressed real nice. And there was Carmen ready to give his talk. He got up before the audience. There were just about 18 of us there that night. In Naples, that was a big crowd about 4 years ago. And so there was Carmen, and he was perspiring, and he was so scared. Well, we all have initial nervousness, or butterflies in our stomach, as they say, before a talk starts. And he started to give his talk, and I was sitting here where Shield is sitting. And I thought, my goodness, I've lost my hearing. Because I could see Carmen making his gestures, talking, and I could see in his mouth his tongue was wiggling, but no noise. Well, that's a funny feeling. It really is, to think that you've gone deaf all of a sudden, but it wasn't that at all. Carmen was so nervous and so excited that he was up there for 4 solid minutes, and that's a long time. He gave his whole talk, and I'm sure Carmen enjoyed every bit of it, because we did. Well, anyway, Carmen was counseled. Next time you get up, Carmen, make some noise. Well, let's look at the serious part of it. The serious part of it is that when Carmen was counseled, it wasn't on the noise especially. It was to get his mind off himself and get it on the things he's talking about. He had his mind on himself, and of course that caused his nervousness, and that's why he lost his speech temporarily. And isn't that the way it is with some of us sometimes? We fall into that snare at times, and we think too much of ourselves, and we get so after a while we think we're something when, let's face it, we are nothing. We don't amount to anything. You know, after we get into the new world, or those who get into the kingdom of heaven, the only reason that we're going to get into the new world is not because we deserve it, but because Jehovah God wanted to do something else that's real nice for us, and He gives us life for the love we showed Him. And here in the book of Romans, the 12th chapter, the 3rd verse, it says, "For through the undeserved kindness given to me, I tell everyone there among you, not to think more of himself than it is necessary to think, but to think so as to have a sound mind, each one as God has distributed to him a measure of faith." So from then on, Carmen didn't put his mind on just himself. He had initial nervousness, but he went right on with his subject, and now, after that, he had made a lot of good noises, and those noises help people to recognize the truth. A few years ago, or next door, we had that clothing drive, and all the joys we had of packing those clothes. Well, I had the privilege of being over in Italy when those clothes were being distributed. There you'll see those brothers and sisters wearing those, and the people of the world over there will say, where did you get that American necktie? Where did you get that American coat? Because it stands out. And the brothers are very proud to say, my American brother sent it to me. American brother. And of course they tell them, my brother in the truth. I don't know who he is. I can't even write to thank him. But he loves me so much that he took one off his own back and he sent it to me, and here it is. And that condemns that worldly man's religion, because they have never received anything from their spiritual brothers. In fact, everything that they should have, they are denied because it's been all taken away from them. And so that served as a great witness. And I thought you'd enjoy knowing how wonderful it was for you to send those brothers those gifts of love. And they certainly do appreciate it. Before I take you out of Naples, there was one other man there that I believe you'll enjoy hearing about. We'll call this man Carlo. Carlo was a man that used to go up to Rome about every 2 or 3 weeks. He would go up there to see his girlfriend. There's nothing wrong in going somewhere to see your girlfriend as long as you're contemplating an honorable marriage. The only thing wrong, and of course it was seriously wrong in this case, Carlo used to go up to Rome, see his girlfriend, but he'd leave behind in Naples a wife and 3 children. And of course the person that he was visiting in Rome had a child and a husband too. Carlo arrived in Rome this time, and someone had been by. Someone like you and I. And they went by that house of this woman, and they left one of those green books, Let God Be True, with this lady. And this lady had seen the sincerity in this person, and so she thought she'd ask some personal questions. And she told this, one of our brothers, just exactly what had been going on with her and Carlo. And so, of course, you know what the answer was. If you want to live in God's new world, you keep away from that filth. You'll ask the Lord to forgive you for what you've done and absolutely turn about and change your course of action. Well, Carlos, when she explained this to Carlo, she told him she didn't want to see him anymore. Well, Carlo couldn't understand it. He said, well, that's some other quack religion that's just come in the country, something new I've never even heard of. He says, you know, there's only one religion, and that's the religion there in Italy. He called it the Christian religion. Well, of course, he said, you can go every week and tell some man here on the earth your sins, and he'll forgive you, and you'll say so many prayers, so many Our Fathers, and so many of what they call Hail Marys, and you'll be forgiven, and then, of course, we'll see each other in the next 2 weeks. But now this person had explained it differently, biblically. So she sent Carlo away. But Carlo asked where he could get some literature, and he'd find something wrong with it right away. And he'd be back, and he'd show it to her. And then, of course, she said, well, Carlo, I like you very much, and I'll believe you if you show me it's wrong. Otherwise, don't you ever come back here. Carlo went down to the branch office, which is in Rome, and he took everything that the society had in stock. He subscribed to the Watchtower and the Awake. He was different than the other brothers in that city or in Italy in many respects, in that he had an excellent education. His father is to this day a director of one of the universities of Naples, and he could speak English, and so he took everything, English and Italian. And they made a big bundle for him, and can't you just see that Bethel brother giving him all this literature? Well, anyway, he went to the nearest church of his religion, and he went in that church, and he prayed to some God, and he told me that he didn't know who that God was, but he prayed anyway, that he could find the truth. And there he was in that church, kneeling down, and he had a whole bundle of truth right under his arm. Well, he studied, and he studied, and he attended all the meetings, and I remember once he came down to this little apartment where we had our Kingdom Hall, and he made a comparison in his mind, of course, with St. Peter's Basilica, or perhaps some other cathedral there in Italy, to the Zia's house. And he said, well, there must be something to it here, because certainly these people don't come down here for what this place looks like. Well, Carlo studied and studied and studied, and the society had sent me a call, and I made it on him, turned him over to the missionaries, and they worked on him, helped him as much as he could, and he studied so hard that today he's the congregation servant of Naples. In fact, since that time, there are 3 congregations now in Naples, and Carlo is the city servant. He's very, very sorry for what he's done in the past, and he has prayed for the Lord's forgiveness, and Jehovah God, a merciful God, as far as we know, has forgiven him, in that he is receiving many blessings now in the kingdom work. So it helps us to appreciate here at home, or anywhere in the theocracy, or the earthly part of it, that is, that we are constantly watching to keep the organization clean. We will not allow anyone to sneak into the organization and corrupt it. And that's why the servants are continually watching, because it is their God-given responsibility to see to it that this organization is kept clean and a vessel fit for God's use. And if there is anyone who does associate for a while that wants to carry on these practices, well, we'd like to say to them, well, there is a religion that we know of, according to Carlo, that will take you, and you can do those things, but not in this organization. It's not permitted, and it never will be. And you'll never, never get away with it, because Jehovah God will find you out, and the angels will just throw you out, because this organization is an organization that Jehovah God is using. Well, the next place that we were assigned to, we were given a special privilege in that we were made circuit servants, and so we went down to Tripoli for the first time. That's Arab country. The people down there dress a lot different than you people do here, or we do here. When the chief of police came there in the morning, he was talking Arabic to the man outside, and Mike could understand Arabic. And he said, now, what's been going on that should be suspected in there? He said, nothing at all. Everything is fine. He said, the only thing is, I believe someone's sick. They just keep going to the bathroom every 15 minutes. Other than that, everything's fine. Well, you know how the world is. He just balled that man up one side and down the other. Just scolded him for all he could think of, called him a lot of bad names. Far different than the theocracy. When we make mistakes, we are counseled, but counseled with love, and we appreciate and we thank Jehovah God and the mature brother for counseling us. But not in the world. They don't know what love is, and of course that man didn't receive any. Well, he said whatever had to be done is done, and so it's all over now. Well, I went down there to try to start something legal. The society wanted some information, and we couldn't get it, but I thought, well, I'll see what can be done, being that they sent me down. And so in the meantime, a brother had come into the truth, Brother Gus, who is a high official in the government of Libya. And so I said, Gus, if you ever have the opportunity of finding something out about that trouble, why, I'll deeply appreciate it, and of course, I'll tell it to the society, and then they'll take over from there. You know, they are interested in true worship. And he said, well, Francis, I'll do the best I can. It's a ticklish thing, but I'll do what I can. One day he was having coffee with a Secret Service man. And so, as the custom went, they were having their coffee after lunch in the outside cafes. And so he said, incidentally, to the Secret Service man, you remember that raid of all that trouble they had with these people they call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses? What in the world caused that? Well, he says, I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a secret if you keep it to yourself. He said to Brother Gus, don't tell anybody. And so, of course, Brother Gus says, you know me. And so the man told him, he said, well, the high clergyman of the Christian religion in the province of Tripoli, which is called Tripolitania, has gone to the governor of that province and told him that these people were against the Islam religion, and they had tendencies of being communists, and they were planning to overthrow the newly formed monarchy. But in the meantime, the work is going on, and the last time I'd been there, which was not too many weeks ago, there were 65 publishers now in Tripoli. There are 5 pioneers, 2 brothers were called to the Rome Bethel. 1 brother is now a circuit servant, and there is a special pioneer working right there in Tripoli. And you know how he works? He dresses up like a farmer. He's got an old straw hat. He carries a basket with him, and in that basket he has potatoes and carrots and so on. And he makes sure those carrot tops are sticking outside that basket, because the people are looking for Jehovah's Witnesses going door to door. And so when they see this man going to a door selling vegetables, well, then they quit peeking out the blinds or out the window, and they figure, well, the fellow's just selling some potatoes. But underneath those material things are the precious spiritual things. And when interest is worked up, he can place literature with those people. And he's doing very, very fine. In fact, his work is showing many good results. And I'm very, very happy to tell you that right now on the island of Malta, the first time that we know of since the Apostle Paul's day, and you know he was shipwrecked there is now a congregation established, and God's witness work is being done on that island. There are 13 publishers, and every one of those, or practically all of them, have been baptized in the bathtub of a brother's home, because, of course, it would be too obvious outside the house. And so the work is going on very nicely. And you'd be interested perhaps to know, well, now how do you do the work there? In different parts of the world, the work is carried on in different manners. Well, here at Malta, we went out in the witness work the first time. It was at 9 o'clock in the evening. And I took a brother with me. His name was Brother John Watkins. He had never been out in the work before. It was his first time. And, of course, he was very nervous and excited. You know, most of the times when we went out, at least practically all of us, our first time, we thought when we rang the doorbell, a lion would come out the door. And so we're usually very frightened. But, of course, after we're in the truth just a few days of doing that, then we realize that the only thing that can come out are imperfect people. And they are usually very harmless. And so we went to the first door, and as we were going to the door, John says, "Francis, how are we going to do this?" And I said, "Well, John, you can say whatever you want when we get there. Just remember never to say the word Jehovah. Never mention the word Bible. And, of course, don't say kingdom, because all Jehovah's Witnesses are identified by the word kingdom. They are the only ones preaching it. And different words such as that." Well, he says, "Francis, I'll listen to you, and then I'll try to remember those things." So we rang the doorbell, and the man came out. He said, "How do you do?" And I said, "Good evening. My name is Mr. Francis Malaspina. I'm very lonely, my friend and I, John here. And we thought we'd just ring anybody's doorbell, and we'd like to talk to you. If you got a few minutes, well, we'd appreciate it. If you haven't, tell us. We'll go to somebody else's door." And he said, "Boy, this is the strangest visit I've ever had." So he said, "Come on in." So we went in, and on the way in, John was behind me and the man was in front of me, and so I looked over at John, and he went, as much as to say, "I guess anything can happen." And so when I got in this house, the only thing I could see, and all there was in that house, were radios. That place was just full of radios. And I don't know a thing about radios. The only thing I know about a radio is you turn it on, and bad news comes out. And so, of course, there I was, and we were talking about radios. You don't need any wires, and in comes the sound from nowhere, and so on. And first thing you know, we were talking about the universe. And this man's face got real red, and his eyes got real big, and he looked at me, and I thought, my gosh, this man's having a heart attack. And so I didn't know what to do. I never saw a man have one of those before. And he says, "I know who you are." Well, I said, "Well, don't you remember?" I said, "I'm Mr. Malaspina. You don't know me, really." He said, "No, you're one of those so-and-so Jehovah's Witnesses." Well, I thought, now, what word or words did I say for that man to know who I was? And I thought, now, everything is going to be spoiled. The brothers may have trouble here. And so I said, "Well, even if I were, so what?" And he says, "Well, 7 years ago, I made a vow that the next Jehovah's Witness that would come to my door, I would shoot him." And I thought, what a place to die. Well, anyway, I'm here, so I don't have to tell you how I got out of there. He didn't shoot me, so that's the important thing anyway. Jehovah God is not forcing His gift of life upon anyone. If they want to die, well, that's very easy. In due time, they just lay down, and that's the end of them. As we went off to the next place to serve, it's the island of Sicily. I have a very, very warm spot in my heart for those Sicilian brothers. You know, those brothers work from the time the sun comes up until it goes down for 300 lira a day. You know how much that is in your money? 47 cents. Well, anyway, when you arrive in that place to serve those brothers, and the congregation sets up on the highest mountain, not hill, but mountain in that area. Sicily is very mountainous. And there, in that, those brothers are at the train station to meet you. And, of course, when you get off the train, they're very happy to see you. And the way you go up in the mountains, and there's no way of getting up there except by walking. And it takes 3.5 hours before you get to the top of that mountain of steady walking in the trails. And there are all these brothers with you. Of course, they want to carry your suitcases. They are very kind and considerate, and they know all the shortcuts in those trails and the way you go. And when a softy like me gets up there, I'm very tired, but those brothers are raring to go. And so up on the top of that mountain, there are all the brothers waiting for you. And it so happens that up there, there's something like 90 to 100 brothers. And they converge on the top of this mountain from all over that area. Some of them have walked for many hours to get there. There would be that coffee and fresh bread. Real fresh, oven fresh. And so I asked the congregation servant, I said, Emilio, where's that bread coming from? He says, oh, my wife gets up a little bit early and she goes and gets it. Goes and gets it where? It takes 3.5 hours just to come up from there. He says, no, she doesn't go there, Francis. She goes 2 hours away. 2 hours going, 2 hours coming back. Before she goes, she does all the chores in the house. They're farmers. Those of you who have lived on a farm, you know that it isn't just getting up, jumping in the car, and you're off to work. Now, that was real love, wasn't it? And so I said, well, she shouldn't do that. He says, well, if you take that privilege away from her, she'll probably cry till you come back here next time. And there she was doing that every single morning. And talk about how love is expressed in a humble and genuine way. When we arrive there, those brothers, sometimes they have one big bowl on the table, and it's filled with spaghetti, and everybody just digs out of that bowl. They all eat out of that bowl. Well, now, when we were there, we could notice it was very obvious. There was a clean new plate and a brand new fork. That fork was probably something you pick up in the 5 and 10 cent store, but it was new, and it was the best they could afford. And it just makes you choke up and tears come in your eyes to think of the love those brothers have for you, to do things like that. You know they've spent their 47 cents easily just for that new fork, and they could never afford it. And there they'll sit and watch you eat, watch every move you make while you're sitting there. And then, of course, one sister came up after a talk to express her love to us. And she says, well, Brother Francis, I got something for you. And I said, sister, you got something for me. I should be giving something to you. I have more than you have. Always have had more than you got. And I don't want anything you have to offer me. And so she said, well, I really feel bad about this now because I've already got it. So I could see she was deeply hurt. And so I said, well, sister, okay, give it to me, but you understand why I didn't want it. And so from now on, don't do that for any of the brothers that come here because they are taken care of. You know what she had? She had a bundle of fresh peas. Well, that's not very much. They're about 23 cents a box over here in the market. But to that sister, she undoubtedly went to her landowner, and her landowner, beyond any doubt, ridiculed her, probably saying, why, those Americans got more than you'll ever have, and here you're giving up your wages for those peas for that guy. Can't you see he's even dressed better than you are? But anyway, she had to pick the peas, and she had to shuck the peas. She even cooked those peas for Gloria and I. And then she had the biggest treat of sitting there, and that was our supper for that night after the visit was over. We had a bowl of peas apiece with some olive oil and some black pepper, and that sister was sitting right here where Sister Halvagen is sitting, watching us and tears in her eyes of joy just because she could give us something and express her love to us for what we had brought in that congregation. In other words, for the society and the organization. Now, isn't that wonderful? Doesn't that make you feel good to know that we are associated with this organization that is just overabounding in love and good works? People who are genuine, people who are going to be our friends forever. And doesn't it make you feel good that if you can make progress and continue in the Lord's service faithfully and always doing the best you possibly can, that Jehovah God is going to give you friends like that forever? Where could you ever go, brothers? What organization could you ever associate with or have associated with where you find that quality of people, even though they are poor? They are certainly rich in love, and they express it to you. And that's what makes those assignments so good. You are the same kind of people here. You are no different than they are. If you aren't, then of course, as the Apostle Paul says, re-examine yourself to see whether you are in the faith. It has to be that way. One night I had gone to bed about 11:30. Here we were on the top of this mountain, and about 10 minutes to 3 in the morning, I heard a voice, "Brother Francis." I thought, I must be dreaming. And so I nudged Gloria, my wife, and I said, what time is it? Isn't it 3 o'clock? Do I hear a voice? Could it be I'm dreaming? What is it? And she says, no, I hear it too. And I said, who is it? And he said, it's me, Emilio, the congregation servant. Well, I thought someone got hurt. And he said, I says, what do you want, Emilio? He says, it's time to go in the service. Well, I thought, I guess I could be wrong. I'm way up here in this mountain. Perhaps the sun takes its time in getting over this mountain. That's why it's dark. Or my watch has stopped. Something's wrong. Surely don't go into work at 3 o'clock. So I went downstairs, and as I was having this coffee, I said to the brother there, there were a whole flock of brothers, all had little teeny lanterns, kerosene lanterns. And I said, incidentally, what time is it? And the congregation servant, he pulled out his timepiece, and he said, well, brother, it's a little bit after 3. We better get going. So I says, where in the world are we going? And he said, well, by the time we get in our territory, Brother Francis, it'll be 3.5 hours from now. And he says another thing, if the neighbors know that we are going out and they know you're here, word's been spread all through the mountains, they know you're here, they're going to go ahead of us and they'll mob us out of the little sections where we go to do the witness work. And so we have to go ahead of them. And so we read the text and asked the Lord's blessing, and away we went. And you could hear those brothers, you go single file because it's very dangerous in those mountains. All these lanterns, and you just have a great big contact point. They all come out, and here you go, you see all these brothers, and they're singing kingdom songs in Italian, and it sounds so nice. And of course, as the day breaks, you ask some questions to find out little things about the brothers, where you can help them, and so on. And so the brothers will say, you see that mountain over there, Brother Malaspina? Yes. Well, see the one behind it, and you can just barely see it. I have a back call over there. How long does it take you to get there? Oh, about 5 hours, he says very apologetically, trying to justify himself. At least he feels that way, and he says, well, I'd go every week, but I can only go every 2 weeks. Because, see this mountain over here? I got another call there, which is only a couple hours away, so I make that regularly. Is that all right? Now, doesn't that make us think, here in America, we really are blessed to have things to help us in the Lord's service. You ever have that feeling it's such a big job to jump into the old Cadillac and step on the starter? And it's a real cold morning, and my gosh, to get over there, oh, well, it'll only be the congregation servant, and the servant's just the same old few. Besides, I'm kind of tired this morning, I'll sleep in. Do you ever feel that way? Would you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning with all those obstacles? You should, and I'm sure you would. Or on your back calls. Have you ever perhaps thought, well, now I placed the literature with that person. When you place the literature, you mark down, call back, very nice. And then when it came time to make the back call, well, that lady acted kind of funny in there. I don't know whether I should make that call or not. Besides, gosh, it's a long ways over there. It takes me about 5 minutes with a car. Those things actually happen, don't they? Sure they do. We are brothers and sisters, and so, of course, we learn from babes in the truth sometimes. Then, brothers, we have to face it. We may be falling away to materialism, and we may lose out. Well, we were out in a desert town one time, just to give you an idea how the work goes on there. It's not as comfortable as it is here, but, of course, we're glad that it is here, as comfortable as it is, that is. But in those places, it's a little bit different. I remember one time, Gloria and I and some people of goodwill, we finished having a study with them and a back call. We stayed overnight there because you can only get there one day and then come back the next. It was way out in the desert, and so they let us stay in their house, and we had dinner with these people. They asked us if we'd like to have some soup. And I thought, boy, I certainly would. It's been a long time since I had a nice bowl of soup. And so we said, all right. And the brother, this person of goodwill, who's now a brother, incidentally, he said, would you like to say a prayer? And I said, I certainly will. And so we bowed our heads, and I wasn't used to the atmosphere in that part of the country yet. And we bowed our heads in prayer, and when we lifted our heads, we found that in our soup they were just full of flies. And I wondered, now what do they do with this soup? So I kept watching over the rim of my glasses, and I noticed that they would just pick them out with a spoon and throw them on the floor. So I thought, well, if you're going to have any soup, Francis, you better pick them out. So I picked them out too, and we had the soup. I didn't even notice whether it changed the flavor or not. I'm still here. So really it isn't too bad if sometimes we get a fly in our soup. And talk about getting to meetings. A sister came to me and said, Brother Francis, I want to say goodbye. I'm going home. And I said, Sister, there's just a half-hour talk, and then it's all over for the entire week. Where are you going? Why don't you stay? You've stayed all the time. And she says, Brother Francis, I'm 72 years old. And there she was, a little thin sister, very sick. You could just see it. And she says, well, when I get home, everybody's against me. You read in the latest experiences there at Rome how they beat the women there and so on. The husbands are like brute beasts and so on. Well, this sister said, when I get home, they'll probably lock me out. I'll be outside all night long. If they let me in, my husband's liable to beat me till I'm black and blue. And you'll see people come to the meetings with their eyes cut and so on. They'll be sitting there just like these sisters are here. And after the meeting, I'd go up and talk to some of them. And they'd say, well, my husband did that because he doesn't want me to attend. But there she'd be, sitting there. And so this little old sister said, by the time I get home, 4 or 5 hours will have passed. So really, I better be going because it'll be midnight before I get there at least. But every step of the way, I'll be so happy thinking of you brothers over there and what you might be talking about. And I'll be praying for Jehovah's blessing to be with you. And you do the same for me. Well, I didn't say any more, of course not. But isn't that something, the way they appreciate the meetings? And there that sister went with her little lantern, said goodbye, and away she went. Well, that makes us appreciate what it means to come to the meetings. This is the place where God's Spirit is given to all of us. It was God's will that you came here tonight, not because of me, but because the congregation called a congregational meeting. And here you are. And you will receive countless blessings for your obedience. I'd just like to tell you a couple things now about the priests there. Priests are as common as they can be there. They're all over the place. And so he says, one of these days I'm going to die. And when I die, I'm going to stay dead. You are the true Christians, and I wish you the victory. Well, we thought, gee, that's a real good expression. That man should be helped. It wasn't just but 2 or 3 days later he was doing the same thing he had done before. Mistreating the brothers. Well did Isaiah prophesy of those kind of people. They honor God with their lips, and their corrupt hearts are far removed from Him. And that's just the way it was in that individual case. This same priest, when he knows that there are some of the sisters in the town going door to door, he'll get on his bicycle. Everyone has a bike over there. And he'll go down the street and he'll make remarks at the sisters. He'll say words like, "Hello there, prostitute." Words like that. Or "Hi, baby," only in Italian, of course. Anything to anger the sisters so that he can bring some legal action against them. Well, that's the kind of people that the devil's using, of course. If he's setting an example for what his organization has taught him in all the years he's been a priest, we know exactly what kind of an organization he belongs to, because that's the fruits of something that is not Christian. And not too far away from there's a brother he's a young brother, 28 years old. He's already had one arm amputated, handbags, puts it around his back, and up in the mountains he goes, knocking on everybody's doors. They've already stoned him out of one village, and he still works those towns, and we had the privilege of working with him. And he was telling us one day, he has a brother who's a priest down here in El Salvador. And this brother came over to Italy to visit him and his family. And he said one day a discussion arose, and of course the brother defended the Bible. And he put this brother, who is a priest, with his back against the wall and embarrassed him because he was not telling the truth. And so that night this priest brother told his fleshly brother, "I don't want you ever to do that to me again, or I'll just denounce you. I'll disown you as a brother. With you, you've embarrassed me before the villagers." And so the brother said, "Now, wasn't that the Bible truth? Wasn't it speaking of what was right? The thing that you have dedicated your life to?" He said, "I know. Your kind of people are also in America. I want nothing to do with it. That's not my goal, so forget about it." Well, this clergyman came back to America, and in the meantime, his mother died. And so the clergyman had other brothers and sisters of his fleshly ties, and so he sent money to our brother in the truth to cover the funeral expenses. And in the letter, he said to that brother, amongst other things, "I'm sending you the money to cover the funeral expenses because I can trust you." Those of his own religion he couldn't trust, and they were of his own family, the one he hated the most. He knew that man was an honest man, so he too, his heart is far removed from Almighty God. So then, that's all we have time for tonight. We could go on and on. But I would like to say that those brothers told me before I left, they said, "Francesco, dargli un bacio per me." You know what that means? It says, "Francis, when you get over there, give them a kiss for us." You know, it's a custom over there for the men to kiss each other when they leave. Don't worry, I'm not going to kiss you brothers. But anyway, so in closing, I'd like to say to you, I'd like to just read you this scripture that's found here at Psalms 119. "They that fear thee will be glad when they see me, because I have hoped in thy word." That's setting a good example, isn't it? So as the brothers told me, I'm going to tell you. May Jehovah God bless you forever and ever. Thank you.